Welcome back to another episode of the Girls Talk Money podcast. Money inevitably touches every single aspect of our lives, and one area that has been super top of mind for us over the past few months has been dating. As two single girls in their 20s, dating is already so difficult, but money is definitely a consideration here as well, making it even more challenging and sometimes uncomfortable to navigate. In this episode, we'll be giving all of our best tips and our honest opinions on navigating dating in your 20s between knowing what you want and then inevitably attracting what you want.
Yes, as Erin said, this topic has been so relevant for us for different reasons. I jokingly say I'm in like the trenches of dating, and I don't know if it's just a Boston thing. Boston girlies can chime in because I know there's a notoriously bad dating scene here, but I feel like this also happens pretty much everywhere. Erin and I got off a podcast episode we were filming a couple weeks ago, and we were just, as we do, a little girly catch up and giving her the update on a really I don't know how you describe it. Eclectic individual, interesting individual that I had dated earlier this year, very briefly went on like one date. And some of the financial conversations that kind of came up in that situation. And I was like, you know what? We should film an episode on this because there's so much to this, the topic of dating and money and the preferences that you have regardless of like where you are in your financial journey. And also just it's just so relevant. Like I have been single for 4 years. My last serious relationship I ended 4 years ago. And I have dated people since then for sure. But I haven't been in like a serious, like committed relationship with any of them. I've dated people exclusively for 3-4 months, and then that it's called like the 3-month rule, where it's like don't get into a serious relationship with someone until you've been seeing them exclusively for 3 months, because at the 90-day mark is when, if they've had a facade, that's when it usually starts to come down. And that's precisely what I found is right around the 3-month mark. I'm like, you ain't it, my friend. And I'm not someone who, I've been in a couple serious relationships. I'd say two, like longer term, like year and a half relationships. But I'm not someone who is always like in a long-term relationship. I really enjoy my peace and I enjoy being by myself, and I don't like to like let someone in if they're not contributing to that or making my life better. But especially in the last, I would say 6 to 8 months or so, money has been something that's been coming up a lot more in dating, and in a very uncomfortable way. And it's funny because Erin and I were talking about this, and she's like, this has never happened to me.
Never. Can you give them an example of like just because you have literally told me the most crazy things just within the last one, and like multiple different stories. I feel like every single date you go on, it's just been like so wild.
I was telling my therapist about this yesterday, and because I went on a date on Friday, and it was just ridiculous for other reasons. I'll tell you the story quickly, then I'll tell you the money ones. So just to give you context about like I don't know, and if anyone has any advice, let me know, okay? I don't know how I attract the level of characters that I end up going on dates with. Like I really don't get it.
She's not being dramatic. Like she literally is not being dramatic here.
No, guys, like this, it's actually crazy. So for example, I went on a date with this guy on Friday, and for context, I'm allergic to gluten and dairy. So he had said he was gonna like pick out a restaurant, and I was just like, hey, make sure it's somewhere that has like allergen friendly options. He's like, got it. Then it's like a couple days before we're supposed to go out, he was like, no gluten and dairy, right? I'm like, yep. He's just like confirming. I'm like, okay, king, like whatever, making sure we're good. So then he goes, do you mind if I ask what happens when you eat gluten or dairy? So I'm like, well, I haven't had dairy in 4.5 years, and I found my gluten allergy a year ago. So I have been glutened since then, and my reaction is like pretty intense, but I don't know what my reaction to dairy is. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, I get like really bad brain fog. I start listing off, symptoms, but like keeping it pretty surface level, right? And this man, grown man, responds and says, I imagine you must get really gassy when you eat dairy. Guys, I
That is when you should have turned down the date, I have to say.
This was like, it was probably, I think it was either, it might have been the day before we were supposed to go. So I was like, how the frick do I walk myself out of this? But I was just like, have some decorum. Have some decorum. You know what I mean? Like, I just was like, if you're in a relationship with someone, fine, make a fart joke. I don't care. But like, I've never met you. You're ultimately a stranger. And what happened to being on your best behavior and trying to be a gentleman before a date? You know what I mean? And
no best behavior.
No, this isn't even the worst of it, guys. Okay, so this was just like the last week one. And I deleted dating apps a couple months ago. I just re-downloaded them about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And after this date, I swiftly deleted them. What was crazy is we ended up going somewhere where it was a restaurant and arcade, and the restaurant literally didn't even have something I could eat. So we literally didn't eat. I was like, I can't eat any of this. So crazy. But earlier this year, I had seen someone. We went on a couple of dates, and there was some money comments, but also some non-financial comments that were made. For example, we were FaceTiming. I was taking my supplements every night, my chronic migraine meds and my supplements. And he goes, "That's a lot of pills. Don't you wish you ever took less pills?" And I was like, "No, actually I don't. I have chronic migraine and I'm very deficient in like vitamin D." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, so I take vitamin D every day." And he goes, "I got some more of that for you." And I was just like, grow the frick up. You know what I mean?
Men.
It was right. It was like genuinely, this was like genuinely, I think he's 25 or 26. I'm like, all right, no, thank you. But the financial things that really, again, and this is just to give you context of like what my unfortunate,
what we've been talking about for the past couple of months.
Yeah, this is the stories I bring to Erin, and I'm like, what the F? Like, how do I end up in these situations? But for example, with two individuals I saw earlier this year, one of them was like, "What do you do for a living?" And I told him, and he was like, "Do you mind me asking how much you made?" And I was like, "Well, I'm comfortable sharing how much I make if you're comfortable sharing how much you make." So he was like, "Yeah, that's fine." I told him how much I make, and then he didn't tell me how much he made. He didn't want to say. And it made me uncomfortable because I'm like, why did you ask? But then you're not comfortable sharing yours. And if it's a situation of feeling inferior because maybe I make more or whatever, I'm like, why'd you ask then? Like, if you're really not confident and secure in who you are and what you make, why ask? But then I had another person, and this one, when I told Erin, she gasped, jaw dropped. Okay. This individual, the financial questions they asked me were not even the worst part, guys. And I'll give you all the deets. Because again, this is a podcast for the girls. So we're keeping it real here. Okay. So same situation, I was talking to someone else, and I told him what I did for a living. And he was like, "You must make a lot of money." And I was like, "I make a good living. I'm very happy with what I make." And he was like, "How much do you make?" This was the first time I ever spoke to him. He was like, "How much do you make?" And I was like, "I'll tell you if you tell me." And he was like, "Okay." And so I'm like, all right, I didn't expect him to be open to telling me. So I was like, okay, well, I made this much. And I was like, "How much did you make?" He's like, "Well, I'm on track to do," he said, like 300K this year. I was like, "Oh, cool. That's like really awesome." And then I was like, I shared like my income goal, which was in a similar range. And he was like, "Well, actually, he's like, I'm thinking about like getting this other job. So I would make 500K." And I'm like, "Sir," I'm like,
he just like needed to be better than you.
Right. No, literally. I'm like, you just totally changed your response to the question as soon as you found out the fact that I made similar. And then he literally was like making jokes in future moments that we talked where he was like, "So when like I'm a stay-at-home dad and like you're bringing in the bread, or like when you're out working and like I'm taking care of the house." And I was like, ew, like again, you're a stranger. I don't know you. First of all, why are you even asking me this question? I'm fine having money conversations with other people who are in the same mindset as me, where it's like, you want to hustle and make more and you want a lot out of life, whatever. I'm fine having those conversations. But then why are you going to turn it back on me? And then you know what, guys, it got worse. Okay. And I could tell that he felt inferior. And I could tell the reason why he didn't want to share how much he made last year was because it was probably less than what I made last year, which is freaking fine. But like,
But he brought it up.
I don't know. Yeah, you brought it up.
Yeah.
So if you feel insecure, why bring it up? But this was the part that Erin gasped at, guys. And it feels like a fever dream to say this out loud. Like, I'm like, how did this even happen to me? But we were FaceTiming. We never went on an actual date. We had just FaceTimed a couple times in the span of like a week. And this was all over FaceTime. So we're FaceTiming. I can tell he feels inferior, likely because I make more than him and he just didn't want to admit that. Because he started making comments that I was like, you're actively trying to make me feel small and to like put control, quote unquote, back in your position because you feel insecure. And so we were talking, and I don't even know what the conversation was, but I used the word ruminate. Okay. Ruminate. And I was saying something, I think we were talking about like how we deal with conflict. And I was like, sometimes I just kind of like ruminate on things. So I try to like stop myself in my tracks and just like bring up a conversation rather than just like letting myself simmer for a long time.
Use that word.
Right. Yeah. And he literally, guys, I can't even believe this happened. He literally goes, I'm going to stop you right there. He goes, he said, you're a really smart woman. He goes, but if you were really that smart, you wouldn't talk up here when everyone else is down here.
This is my favorite out of all of the stories, all of the literal insane stories you've told me.
And this is literally only three of the people. Like, there are so many other people, guys, that I've talked to over the last few years that
How does this keep happening to you?
I don't know. I really don't know, because I feel like I'm very approachable. I feel like I'm very personable. When I think about my dating profile, it's very normal. I'm very, you know what I mean? Like, it's not
nothing that would attract the wackos.
And they are wackos. I don't get how I end up in this situation. But the thing is like, through all of this, it's really, I've learned so much dating wackos, I will say. And I've talked to my therapist about it all the time, because my therapist, every time I tell her a story, she's like, girl, what the hell? I'm like, girl, I don't know. But I've realized, and through like talking to Erin, who like has much better luck when it comes to dating,
exponentially. Not to be like that, but like, you set the bar really low.
Yeah, I think like probably like 99% of people are doing better.
Grace and I are total opposites in this regard, because I always say like, I have not spent, and this is like honestly kind of a red flag, I have not spent an entire calendar year single since I was 15, literally 15 or 16, like,
which is crazy.
Like, I am like a long-term relationship girl somehow, some way. You mentioned the 90-day rule. I've never followed the 90-day rule, and like moving forward for sure. But somehow, some way, I've just always found myself in relationships with non-whack jobs.
Non-whack jobs, especially. I just like, Erin will go on a date and she'll be like, oh my God, he was so great. Like, he was so smart. And so like, he paid the bill. And I'm like, yeah, I just went on this date and this man didn't even take his card out. And then I was like, hey, I went on a date when I was in Los Angeles last year, and the man was so sweet, but he literally didn't even take his card out. We were sitting there with the bill on the table. So I like motioned for my purse because I was like ready to leave. So I was kind of like, okay, let me motion for my purse, and that'll like spark him. He just sat there. He didn't reach for his wallet.
You pay?
Yeah.
You paid for the whole date?
$55 brunch. Because I pulled out my card, and
he just like let you. He
was like,
didn't care.
I was like, oh, I'm like, do you want to split? Because he like wasn't reaching for his card, and he was like, no, like that's okay. But then he's just continued to sit there and didn't take his card out. So then I was like, okay. I'm like, well, I was like, I guess I'll get it. And he was like, oh, okay. He's like, sure. He's like, that's fine. He's like, I'll grab coffee, because we were going to get coffee after that and go for a walk on the beach. I was like, why did I just pay $55 for this brunch? Like, okay.
Oh my God. Yeah. I've never heard this story before. This is the first time I'm hearing this. My jaw is literally on the ground again.
In January of last year. It's funny though, because I will say I've gone on other dates where men have gotten upset that they paid for the date. I went on a date with let's just say someone who worked in a profession that I didn't feel aligned with my values and what I'm looking for. But I was like, I want to date with a cop. And I personally don't really want to date a cop. just based on my values and preferences. But I was like, you know what? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll go on the date, just like see like what is the situation. Started off on a terribly wrong foot. Second we got there, first thing he said when we sat down was, he goes, I don't usually go on dates with liberals, but you were so pretty, I couldn't believe that you sent me a like on Hinge. So I was like, oh, Jesus freaking Christ.
Wait,
Like I was
someone
like,
else say like, how are you a liberal and also entrepreneurial?
oh yeah, I got a like the other day on my Hinge that said, because my job, I just put entrepreneur because it's easier. But this guy messaged me or sent me a like, and he was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know entrepreneurs could be liberals." And I was like, "What the frick?" Like, guys, I'm like, just
You got to
please
get out
pull it
of
together.
Boston. I think
Oh my
I was
God.
telling Grace the other day, I always tell my friends, I have one friend who is like so beautiful, has the best personality, but just has the worst luck in dating. And she just moved away from Pittsburgh. And I was like, I'm so excited for you to get out of Pittsburgh because I think that's a really good sign that you're not meant to be somewhere, is when you just like
Yeah.
can't find people that you mesh with. So that's definitely your situation because that's insane. Those are literally all so insane. The worst thing that happened to me, but it wasn't someone that I was like pursuing, but a random stranger walked up to me last summer, like when I was single, and we were in a bar. It was like in the middle of the night. We were in a bar and he walked up to me and he was like, my friend said that you like have a lot of followers or something. And he goes, and I told him there's no way because if she were famous, she would be prettier.
I remember this. Yeah. And
And
was
then I was
like,
like, literally my jaw was just on the ground. But the worst part about that was that after he said that, and I literally had no response because my jaw was on the ground, he tried to flirt with me. And I posted a TikTok video about it. And apparently that's something that insecure men will do because they'll try to like humble you and bring you down to their level and then try to flirt with you because you're now on their level, apparently.
which is so weird. Like, it's like, what do you think? Think it through. Run
Think
through
it
the
through.
Scenario in your head. What do you envision me responding to that? You know, just like this guy when I went on the date with him, he's like, I don't usually go on dates with liberals, but you were so pretty. What do you think I'm going to say to that? Thanks.
Thanks.
You know what
Thanks
I
for
mean?
calling
Right?
me
Like,
pretty.
no. And at the end of the date too, he was like, I mean, he was just like, as a cop, he literally said to me, he was like, being a cop is the hardest job in the world. He said, there is no other job out there where what you do outside of work impacts your employment. And I was like,
There's a lot
you
of
are
other jobs.
so right. Like, I was like, did you hear about like the teacher that was like throwing racial slurs at someone in a park? Like, she lost her job quickly. If I went and shook my ass on the street corner, I'm sure some of my clients would be like, no, I don't want to work.
Well,
You know
yeah,
what I
there's just
mean?
like a lot of examples where that
Right?
could be
Yeah.
the
Like, I
case.
was like, okay, you're a little out of touch, friend. And at the end of the day, he was like, so how do you feel about the date? Like, would you want to go on another date? And I was like, if I'm being totally honest with you, no. No, like, I don't think we're each other's person. And he literally was like, he's like, so I just like wasted my time to come out here. And I said, yes, literally said this to me. And I said to him, I said, actually, you picked a restaurant that's a 3-minute drive from your apartment and a 45-minute drive from mine.
God.
So I said, I literally dead ass word for word. I said, so if
Like,
anyone
you
wasted
wasted
time,
your time.
I said, it was me. Thank you. He goes, well, he said, I spent money on this too. And I said, I can Venmo you right now. I said, would you like me to do that? I said, I can do it. And he said, no, it's not even about that. I said, then what is it about? Because if it's not about the time or money, what's it about? Like, he was
He's just
all pissed.
angry.
He got up from the table and literally left, like, without saying a word to me. It was,
Oh my
again,
gosh.
just so crazy. But it's like, what do y'all want? You know?
Yeah.
And like, why are we acting like this? But through all of it, it's just made me so aware of my preferences. And I think through having conversations with you and like my other friends that are not in the dating trenches and that actually have good partners or whatever, it's made me realize that having dating preferences and knowing what you want is, one, very important, but also it's okay to have those preferences, you know? Like, I think I used to feel this guilt. Like, I want someone who pays.
Yeah.
I do. I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
actually, I'm not sorry. You know,
And you don't want someone who's going to make you feel guilty for them paying.
right.
100
Like, I'm sorry, if you take me out on a date, you
can pay for it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think because I think before I was like, well, you know, I don't want to like not go out with someone what if they're unable to pay for a date? you know? And I would be like, oh, well, I should still go on the date with them. Like, I can afford to pay for the date. So what's the big deal? But then it's like, why, if you can't afford to take me on a date and pay $40 for dinner, we're not in the same place financially. And if I'm being so honest with myself, I would like someone who can afford to date and someone who can afford to, like, I want a partner I can travel with. I would love someone who can afford to travel with me, or who has a flexible job that can travel with me, or you know what I mean? And I think we love to say that the money does not matter. And I'm not going to be like, so what do you make? Oh, you don't make this much? Next. You know, like, that's not the energy I'm coming into it with. But it's like, I do want someone who wants to and is able to, or finds a way to pay for dates when they take me out. And you know, like, if we're going to go on a date and we don't live in the same place, like, they'll send an Uber for me. Like, that's hot. It's hot, right? Like,
Yes,
I
it's
find it
masculine. It
attractive.
is like so
Yes.
masculine and just like, yeah, 100%. And I think like we've definitely talked about this before, but just because we want the guy to pay for a date doesn't mean that we're expecting lavish dates, if that makes sense.
No.
Like, honestly, I hate dinner dates for first dates. Like, I literally hate
Yeah.
them so much. I don't want to go like eat a steak in front of you. I really don't. Like, we're
Yeah.
literal strangers and
Yeah.
we are literal. I mean, obviously, depending how you met someone, like, if you know them in your personal life and it's not like a cold intro, like you didn't meet on a dating app or something, it's a little bit different.
Mhm.
But we're still getting to know each other. We're still like seeing if we like if we're compatible at all. So committing to a 3-hour dinner just like really doesn't sound that fun to me. So let's go grab coffee and go on a walk, or let's go on a walk and go grab a drink after. Like, they definitely don't have to be expensive dates, especially for the first one. But then like once you do get over that hump of the first date, if both parties decide that they want to put effort into the relationship, that's when I want a guy to be like, okay, I made a reservation at a restaurant. We're like going to go to dinner. I'm going to come pick you up. Like, that's when I want him to like take care of me in that sense.
100%. Some of the best first dates I've been on, we went bowling. And then we like played in the arcade, and then we just like sat down at a table and talked for a little while. And it was so nice because bowling, like, there's no way to bowl without looking a freaking fool. Like, there's just, it's not possible.
Yeah.
It's not cute, but like it kind of breaks the ice because it's like funny. Like, you just have to kind of lean into it and enjoy it. Or like, I've gone mini golfing with people, or yeah, just like grabbing coffee and sitting at a coffee shop and chatting, or walking around the city. And I enjoy those things. But I think, and what we've talked about a lot is, Erin and I are both kind of like spiritual people. And one of like, I think this all relates back to, we both like men who are in their masculine energy. And for people who might not be familiar with this whole idea of like divine versus divine masculine versus feminine, is basically it's like the two types of energies that everyone has. And it's not like boy, girl, like, it's just feminine and masculine are just like the terms
Yeah,
that
like we
kind of
all have a
describe
mix
it.
of both.
Yeah, we all have a mix of both. So it's not bad. Like, Erin and I both have masculine energy and feminine energy. But basically, the divine feminine are the qualities of someone that are associated with like intuition, being nurturing, compassion, creativity, and emotional intelligence. As where the divine masculine is associated with being active, assertive, logical, rational, and strong. So, like, for example, Erin and I are both very logical and rational and very assertive in running our businesses, but we feel more balanced as women. Personally, the two of us feel more balanced and in alignment when we are also allowing ourselves to be nurturing and compassionate and, you know, emotionally intelligent and creative. And finding a balance between the two leads to, like, you know, again, feeling more in alignment and feeling better. And I think what I've realized is, I am more attracted to a man who is more in his divine masculine, someone who wants to be more assertive in the way of like planning a date, or being more like taking charge, kind of like leading, protecting, providing that energy. I simply just find it so attractive. And that's okay, right? Like, that's fine. And it took me so long to feel okay with that, because I felt this guilt of like, well, what if this person can't provide? But it's like, I'm not asking for them to buy me a friggin' house, you know what I mean? Or buy me a Range Rover. Like, I'm asking for them to like pay for the coffee date, you
Yeah, or
know?
like take the initiative to plan the date. That is like the biggest
Mm-hmm.
thing. Yeah,
Yes.
100%. I feel like
Yes.
like I said, I've been in a lot of relationships. I've spent a lot of time in long-term relationships in my life, and I feel like the first couple were like when I was in high school, and I've always dated older. So like I would be in high school and the person would be out of high school. So they were actually, that person was in the army. So he had
Mhm.
like literally a full-time job and I was still in high school. So I like obviously let him take care of me because he was the one with the job and I was in high school. And then same
Mhm.
thing in college. I was in college and the person was out of college. So I was like, yeah, he can take care of me. Like I'm still a college student. But then moving into adult relationships, I think I really got away from that because I would feel guilty about it. And I would be like, well, we both make money. So, like, why is this person taking me on dates? And it got to the point where, with one of my ex boyfriends, where we were both adults, both making money, um, I like wouldn't let him pay for dates, or like I would like be weird about it. I'd be like, okay, you paid for a date, so like let me pay for this one. But it doesn't have to be like that. I'm totally in the boat that a guy should pay for a date. This, have you seen the video of Alex Earl? I like love her and her boyfriend. They like make content together all the time, and she was like, they were getting ready for a date, and she was like showing what was going into her purse, and she was like, ID because we're drinking wine, lip gloss, lip liner. That's all men should pay, or something
Yes.
like that. And people have been like stitching it and making sounds. That's like how I'm thinking.
I
That's like
love
what's
that.
coming to my mind. But I am in the boat that there are other ways to compensate, to be in your feminine, because guys like that in return. Guys want to like protect and provide, but then at the same time they like when girls are like nurturing and feeling like they're taking care of them in different, more feminine ways. So I feel like there's definitely ways to compensate once you get away from the like casually dating into more of a serious relationship type thing, whether that's like asking them to come over and cook them dinner or just like different things like that to kind of like be in your feminine, but still allow them to, if we're sitting down at a table, I want you to pay for dinner. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, honestly, I think back to, because this has been like a pretty recent realization for me because I was holding on to this guilt about letting someone pay all the time for a very long time. But in the past like 6 months or so, I've been like, it's okay to have this preference. So it's still pretty new. But I think back to someone I dated last year for a few months. We just had very different attachment styles and that impacted communication. So it just didn't work out. But he was an angel. Um, I thought about the fact that I was so happy when I was seeing this person. Again, he was an angel. I always felt very taken care of and cared for. And I think back to what that was like. And I'm like, I remember our first date, we went to a restaurant. I had told him about, hey, I have allergies. He was like, are you comfortable sharing what those are so I can find a place that works well for both of us? I was like, sure. He did his research. He called the restaurant to ask, would someone with a gluten and dairy allergy be able to eat here? They said, yes, we have a gluten-free menu, whatever. Then he arrived several minutes early, got our table, and made sure I had a gluten-free menu on my like seat so that I didn't have to worry about asking. And like that was like one example of it. Every time
Yeah.
I'd hang out with him, he was always like, did you eat? Like, have you eaten today? Like, are you thirsty? Do you need anything? Like, ever always trying to like take care of me. Literally, always making sure. I remember it was like we moved kind of fast because we were both just so excited about each other. And I was like staying over his place by like the third date, and he was like, "Oh, he's like, I want to make sure that you have a toothbrush and makeup wipes and like anything that you would need here at my place, so you don't have to worry about bringing any of it." He Every time we would drive anywhere, he would always drive. He was like, no, he's like, you should just be like passenger princess. Like, I don't want you to have to worry about
Absolutely.
like navigating to get there. And it was such a change. Like, I remember even one time I planned a date for us because he had planned multiple for us. So I planned a date based on like a couple things he had said he wanted to do. We went to like sushi and axe throwing, and I literally planned the date. I was like, I'll drive. He was like, no. He was like, just tell me where we're going. Like, give me the surprise when we get in the car, and then I'll drive us there. He literally drove us there. And you know what? Honestly, I was so down bad. I was down bad. Like, I really was. Like,
Yeah, and you wouldn't have
I
been if he wasn't like that. Yeah.
no, I was so attracted to him and I felt so taken care of. Like, it was genuinely beautiful. Like I could just be in the car, like like telling my story and like jamming to the music and like not worrying about where we're driving. And honestly, it was so hot. Like
Yeah.
I like him just like taking care of the directions and not like making me, you know, hold the phone and like share the directions the whole time, or me not having to like plan all the dates. Like I can't even tell you the number of men that want to take me out on a date. They say, let's go to dinner. I say, okay, I have allergies. Can we just like make sure it's somewhere that's good? And they say, why don't you pick the place and let me know? And I'm like, sir, Google is freaking free.
Google, yeah.
You can literally look up menus and you can call, like
Or
take
he can
the
just like double
initiative.
check with you
Yeah, or
before
send me the menu. Yeah, and
yeah,
like double check.
here's a
Like it's
place, like is this okay with you? And you can say yes or no. Yeah,
yes.
and again, if this isn't your preference, if you're listening to this being like, no, it actually makes me super uncomfortable when guys like pay for the dates. I want to like split everything, especially on the first date. That is totally fine. Just like with
Yeah.
anything in dating, it's a preference. But I also think it's important to remember that guys have preferences just like we do. And
Mhm.
if we're going to sit here and be like, oh, we want a guy to like pay for a date if he's going to ask me on a date, guys are also sitting there being like, some guys really like when girls have their nails done, their hair done. If a girl looks really put together with her outfits, jewelry, all of that, like that's a preference on a man's side as well. And those things cost money too. So like it's totally a preference both ways, and money is inevitably a factor in all of those preferences. So it's just about like finding, but then also attracting the type of person that has like the same preferences as you.
Yeah, 100%. I just think it comes back to the whole thing of like, if you're looking for someone that you could see yourself dating for a long time, right? Which I think is what a lot, like most people want, I would say, is like most people eventually want to like get married and like be with someone for a long time, whatever. You have to be really honest with yourself about what your preferences are and own it. Like I, for example, I would love to be with someone who is more in like a non-traditional career. Like I would love to date an entrepreneur or an athlete or a like real estate investor, or you know what I mean? Someone who is kind of out hustling, trying to build their dream life in the same or similar way that I am. Does that mean that I'm like, absolutely no, will not go on a date with someone in a different career? No, not necessarily. However, if I'm being like very honest with myself, when I think about the future family that I want and the future lifestyle I want to be with someone that can travel and go work remotely from somewhere else with me, or who like we can have more than one house and like it's not a big deal to go like, oh hey, I feel like going to the other house right now, let's go to the other house. Because the amount of wealth that I want to build and the life I want to live, I just feel like it lends itself to be a better lifestyle if both parties are more entrepreneurial and remote, and you know what I
100%.
mean? I
And I
don't
think
know.
that comes down to the conversation of like, people say that girls are only after the money, and it's not that. Like, I'm not
Mm-mm.
chasing someone that is like just because they're successful or just because they make like X amount of money, but you're chasing the ambition. Because as someone who
Mm-hmm.
considers themselves very ambitious people, if someone isn't on the same wavelength, or like you said, they're not after the same type of wealth and success that you're after for yourself, then ultimately you're going to land at two different places in your life because you want to achieve X milestone and they don't want to achieve X milestone. I love
Mm-hmm.
like the couples that, I don't want to say like go into business with their partner, but like to a certain extent, they are like their businesses are intertwined. I could so see myself with someone that like owns multiple businesses, and like I also own multiple businesses, and we're kind of like intertwined, helping each other and like talking about that. Like because that's so top of mind for me. And if I can't have those conversations with my partner, then like what is the fun of that? So I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
just as like someone who really intertwines work and life, I think I also need to be with someone who really intertwines work and life.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think someone with more non-traditional career really, I'm really interested in dating someone like that, because I think, and there's nothing wrong with like if you have a job, like a normal like 9 to 5 job or whatever, and you really like it and you want to do that for the rest of your life, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, you might find it more attractive or better to be with someone who wants something similar, someone who maybe, you know, let's say you work for a certain school system. I know someone who works for a school system and really likes it and could see themselves being in that school system for a long time. You're probably not It's probably going to be challenging to date someone who wants to be a digital nomad, right? And travel every month because you need to be in person to go work in the school system you work in. Or like, so you'd probably jive better with or be more attracted to someone who also wants to plant roots in the area that you are in because that helps support your career. And that goes for lots of different things. But I think for me, as someone who wants to like live in a lot of different places and travel to a lot of different places and own multiple businesses and things like that, I think I feel like my relationship would just be really strong with someone who's in that same mindset and, like you said, the ambition behind it. Because for me, I doing the same thing for the rest of my life is my personal hell. That is like
100%.
someone else's dream, right? Like to
Yep.
do the same thing, live in the same place, like they love that. That sounds awful to me. So I feel like I wouldn't necessarily love dating someone who isn't in that same mindset of wanting to do a bunch of different things and experiment and like invest in businesses together, or you know what I mean? Like I want
Yeah.
someone who's in that same mindset. I will also say too, when I haven't dated someone who necessarily is fully in the same mindset as me, but I have the person I dated in the fall that I got along with really well, was also had like really big dreams for their career and was kind of like in one of the stepping stones that they needed to be in to get to the next point. And just like I could literally talk to him and be like, oh yeah, like I just signed this client for $3,000 a month. And he'd be like, let's go. Like, that's so exciting. Like, good for you. Like, he was like, hell yeah. Like, are you planning to upsell them on things? Like, how are you, going to grow that contract? Like, he was asking questions
Yeah, like
that were
intentional
so
questions because he
intentional
understood. Yeah.
exactly, because they understood and is in the same mindset. And I want that. I genuinely want a partner that I feel like makes me a better person. And I feel like in order to make me a better person in the work situation, like I need someone who challenges me. And if they're not in the same mindset as me, where they're not always looking for ways to grow and like build this dream life, how are they going to challenge me? And it's okay to want that, because I know that for me to be happy in a long-term relationship, that needs to be there. So,
Yes.
and that's fine. Like, own it,
100%. There's so much here. But I totally agree with everything that you just said. I feel like this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, where when you're having relationships in like high school and college, these types of things don't matter. It's sort of just like, do I like this person and do I have fun with them in this moment in time? But when you get into adult relationships, then you really realize how important this stuff is. And it's not like, obviously it's important how you like jive with each other and all of that, but the lifestyle piece is so important, because ultimately this is going to be your person for the rest of your life. And like, you obviously should be dating as an adult with the intention that this person could become your person for the rest of your life. So if the lifestyle that you want versus the lifestyle that they want doesn't match up, then it's not going to work in the long term. And you're ultimately going to feel like, I don't want to say you settled, but it's ultimately going to feel like there's a piece missing. But I totally agree with you on like you want someone that challenges you in the areas that are important to you. Maybe you are in a situation where you're not an entrepreneur, you're not like trying to build businesses, you're not like trying to do the things that Grace and I are talking about here. So the career aspect, someone pushing you in that regard isn't as important to you, but there's probably a different pillar of your life that is applicable for. I know for me, career is such a big one. I do want someone that can talk to me about work, that's in a similar line of work as me, but that also fitness is the other really big one. I do not think I could be with someone that does not prioritize their health in the way that I know that I want to, just like becoming an adult and like really having, I don't want to say like aesthetic goals, but like my health and my fitness are so important to me. And I don't think I could be with someone that spends their Sundays hungover, like eating fast food. I just really couldn't.
Yeah.
So it's okay to have these preferences, but I think like that kind of goes into the idea of just like attracting what you want. This is something that Grace and I were talking about when we were having the conversation about dating, which prompted us to film this podcast episode. But just kind of remembering that, like, just as we're sitting here talking about our preferences and what we're looking for, guys are also doing the same, and they're looking for someone that, like, if you're sitting here saying that you are looking for someone that has their shit together in X, Y, and Z areas, guys are also doing the same thing. They're saying, I want a girl that has their shit together in X, Y, and Z areas. And I think just like focusing on yourself, and this is something that I've been trying to do in 2024, is really focusing on myself, making sure I'm showing up for myself every day, between my health and fitness habits, but then also getting ready every single day. Like, I want to feel like the absolute best version of myself, because that ultimately attracts someone who's also in the best version of themselves, if that makes sense.
I think too, it's like, because I feel like people might hear this and be like, well, I shouldn't change myself to fit other people. And it's like, no, but when you think about, like, when I think about what I look for in a person, I don't feel like it's fair for me to expect that from them unless I bring the same
Absolutely.
energy and things to the
Yes.
table. Like, when I think about a person that I want, I'm like, it's someone who does make an effort to maintain their health, whether that's, I'm not saying they need to be like this lean, mean, greens eating machine, but you know what I mean? I'm like, I want someone who takes care of themselves, right? I want someone who cares about their hygiene and cares about their health, and someone who wants to be active. Well, do I think that someone like that, the person that I want, do I think someone like that is looking for a woman who doesn't take care of herself?
Yeah, doesn't do the things that she's expecting.
Like doesn't take care of herself, doesn't exercise, doesn't eat healthy, doesn't take care of her appearance. Like, do I genuinely think the person that I'm looking for is looking for the opposite?
Yeah.
No, right? Like, I'm like, the person that I want to date is probably looking for similar things. So yeah, I should focus on myself, because I also think about, and my friend says this all the time. His name's Taylor Nardoni. He's like a spirituality coach. He says all the time, he's like, if what you wanted showed up right now in this moment, would you be ready to handle it? And this was a realization I had at the beginning of this year, where I was like, if my dream relationship showed up, would I be able to maintain that? And the reality was, in January, I wasn't really sure, because when I was living at my parents' house, I was doing a poor job keeping up with myself, because I was working from like my parents' living room and I was working from home. I was like, I don't need to put myself together every day. I can just wear whatever comfy clothes I want. Like, I would wear like old stuff that I've had from high school. And because I wasn't going out much, I just held on to the same clothes that I didn't really love. And I'm like, no, like, if my dream relationship showed up, if my dream man, if he came knocking on my door right now and I had to answer the door in the middle of my work day from my parents, he would be like, girl, what the hell? Because I was wearing like sweatpants that I had from high school and my hair was looking crazy. You know what? I'm just like, and I wasn't in a place where I was confident in my ability to show up for myself, because I wasn't taking care of myself. And so I've spent this whole year just working on showing up for myself and being consistent in my habits, and not being, I'm so unflexible about that. Like, if someone's like, oh, can you hang out tonight? I'm like, no, sorry. I actually I'm going to the gym for a workout class at that time, because I need to be consistent in showing up for myself. Not because I want to do that in order to get someone, but because
that's the only way, like, you're going to find the person that's actually right for you.
Right. I'm not going to find someone, the type of person I'm looking for, if I'm not bringing to the table what I'm expecting out of them. And I feel like that, I don't know, it's very like raw and honest to be honest with yourself and be like, I'm not bringing to the table what I'm expecting from someone else, and really like working on that. But it's real. Like, there's so many ways like I could improve and bring to the table what I'm looking for. And that's like part of the reason I deleted dating apps earlier this year and decided to work on it, because I was like, I'm not interested at this point in my life. I'm not interested in just like any relationship. If I'm going to get in a relationship with someone, it's someone that I could genuinely see myself dating for a long time. And what I am looking for is very specific. So I'm not going to be just like dating whoever and like being in a relationship with whoever. It's going to be a very specific type of person. But that also means that I need to show up as the best version of me, if that's the kind of relationship, like if I want the best relationship possible.
Absolutely. Well, we are just about out of time. I feel like this episode went so quick, and this is a little bit of a different type of episode for us. Grace and I kind of want to test out the just like conversational, almost like inside scoop into conversations that Grace and I genuinely have when the microphone is not turned on, because we're actually friends and we actually talk outside of just filming podcast episodes about money once a week. So if you guys like this type of episode, or if there's any other topic that you want to hear us cover sort of in this format, please leave your questions, your feedback, your episode ideas all in Spotify, or feel free to DM us on Instagram at Girls Talk Money Pod and give all of your thoughts. If you have like differing opinions from us, this was sort of like a hot takes episode almost, all about our hot takes when it comes to dating and money. But feel free to DM us, feel free to leave your questions in Spotify. And thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Girls Talk Money podcast.